making appropriation therefore and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Blumenfield? Was it Mr. Tirico? Mr. Tirico, you're up. Mr. Tirico.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. This evening I'm proud to present AB 1625 on behalf of the Speaker. This bill ratifies a memorandum of understanding reached between SAU Local 1000 and its 9 bargaining units and the administration. The terms of the agreement are as follows: reduced pension formula for new employees, increased pension contribution for current employees and new employees, a personal leave program that provides for 1 unpaid leave day per month for 12 months, which reduces pay roughly by 5%. This agreement will save over $382 million in the first year alone and several $100 million over the life of the contract and beyond through the significant pension reforms that are achieved. Respectfully ask for an aye vote on this MOU.
Mr. Blumenfield?
Thank you. Just want to add, thrilled about SEIU and the governor coming together. The Budget Act recognizes savings from state employee savings, which will in part be achieved through this MOU, future MOUs, and other administrative actions, including the furloughs that have been on the books this year.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon moves the call. SB 871, clerk will read.
Senate Bill 871 by Senator Hollingsworth and others, an act relating to state employees and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Garrick.
Good evening. Sorry, slightly distracted here. A few requests from the Speaker. Members, As you know, California has a looming crisis with public employee pensions. A large part of this crisis can be traced back to 1999 when the legislature granted huge benefit increases to state workers. CalPERS promised that these new Cadillac benefit plans would cost taxpayers not a dime. They foolishly banked on the stock market continuing to rise forever. They ignored economic cycles that show that every boom is followed by a bust. And they hid information from the legislature detailing what would happen if the market took a downturn. In the last 10 years, the worst-case scenario, unfortunately, has played out. The cost to cover the state workers' retirement benefits that we have all promised rose from $400 million to over $3 billion annually. Today, taxpayers' payments to CalPERS are crowding out other very vital priorities like education and public safety. This bill provides us the opportunity today to begin the process of a long pension plan reform that we will have to accomplish. That is why I am authoring this bill that will start to bring our unfunded pension liabilities under control. We all have to remember that public pensions are paid for by the hardworking taxpayers of this state. It's not right to ask those same taxpayers who are draining their own retirement accounts to continue to fund state workers' pensions unheard of in the private sector. This bill is a first step towards rolling back irresponsible pension increases and realizing significant savings in state labor costs in the long run. The pension reform bill before us will do the following items. We'll be changing retirement formulas and benefit calculations for new hires, prohibiting pension spiking by spreading out the years of service in which a lifetime pension is calculated, inserting transparency language to ensure that CalPERS honestly reports pension costs and the actual returns, and also decreases the state's unfunded retiree obligation by tens of billions of dollars over the long term. These reforms are a significant improvement over the status quo that is challenging us. Combined with renegotiated contracts, these reforms will result in tens of billions of dollars in savings in coming years and decades. While this bill is not the final word on pension reform, it is a first step forward towards what we need to accomplish, and that is bringing public employee retirement plans in line with those of the private sector and where they are affordable and realistic. I respectfully ask for an aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon moves the call. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Can you lift the call on AB 1625?
Okay, members, we're lifting the call on AB 1625. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 56, noes 3 on the urgency. Ayes 56, no 3 on the measure. Urgency clause is adopted. Senate amendments are concurred in. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker. Can you lift the call on SB 871?
SB 871. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon moves the call. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, there are amendments at the desk. I'd like to waive, you asked me not to consent to take up those amendments now, and then once they are adopted, to take up this bill without reference to file.
SB 863. Any objections? Seeing none, clerk will read with amendments.
Senate Bill 863 with amendments by Senator Bloomfield.
Any objection to a voice vote on these amendments? Okay, all those in favor say aye. All those opposed say nay. The ayes have it. The amendments are adopted. Mr. Blumenfield, you can take this measure up without reference to file. In mock-up form, SB 863. Mr. Blumenfield. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 863 by the Senate Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to local government, making an appropriation therefore, and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Calderon.
Of information, where is the analysis now on the amended version? Is it on the screen?
Should be on the computer.
Is it on the desktop?
Should be. Is it not?
Okay, on the desktop.
The mock-up and the analysis are available to the members on your laptops. Can someone verify that? Okay. It's under analysis. Mr. Calderon.
Madam Speaker, can we pass temporarily on this measure?
Without objection. Okay, members, we are going to take up AB 342. Clerk will read.
Assembly Bill 342 by Assemblymember John A. Perez and others, an act relating to Medi-Cal, making an appropriation therefore and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Monning.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm taking this up on behalf of Speaker John Perez, AB 342. The bill before you this evening just passed out of the Senate on a 29-1 vote. Senate amendments create the coverage expansion and enrollment demonstration projects, which allows all of California's counties to voluntarily access federal matching funds for county expenditures made on behalf of health care coverage to low-income uninsured adults. Currently, the federal government provides funding to only 10 counties for coverage projects. These projects are funded solely by the participating county on a voluntary basis. There is no general fund cost. Establishing coverage initiatives is something that counties want to do. AB 342 provides important federal support to county safety net providers, as well as a significant improvement in quality, coordinated care for the uninsured childless adult population, and at no cost to the state general fund. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no further questions or debate, clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon moves the call. SB 858. SB 858, clerk will read.
Senate Bill 858 by the Senate Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to taxation, making an appropriation therefore, and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Calderon.
Speaker, request unanimous consent to take up amendments to this bill, and if the amendments are adopted, to take up this bill without reference to file. No.
This bill was already amended earlier today, so we're ready to take up the bill.
All right, so then do we need to take it up without reference to file? And I request unanimous consent to do that. But give me a second here. This is the...
And the bill is in print, members. We have to vote. Mr. Calderon?
Yes, I request unanimous consent to take up this 840, was it 848?
858.
858 without reference to file.
Without objection? Mr. Blumenfield?
Okay, thank you, Madam Speaker, members.
Clerk will read.
Senate Bill 858 by Senate Committee on Budget and Fiscal Review, an act relating to taxation, making an appropriation therefore, and declaring the urgency thereof to take effect immediately.
Mr. Blumenfield.
Thank you. This bill would change business taxation and adopt certain measures designed to enhance taxpayer compliance, among other things. Corporation business taxes. This bill continues the suspension of net operating losses for an additional 2 years, and it delays for 2 years the ability of businesses to carry back losses. This provision will result in an additional $1.2 billion in revenues. Because tax benefits are delayed, business will not actually lose any tax assets, including NOLs or other tax breaks. Delaying the effective date of the corporate tax breaks allows companies to continue as they have for the past couple of years. No abrupt adjustment is necessary. Small businesses that have an income of less than $300,000 annually are exempted from this suspension. In addition, the bill is crafted to allow companies that purchased other companies and had a one-time capital gains in 2008 to be able to use the NOLs to offset these one-time gains, which impacts the Humboldt Redwoods Company, as noted in the media. There's also a change in the apportionment method for corporations regarding cost of performance. This bill allows companies who are unable or choose not to elect the single sales factor apportionment method to use an alternative means of determining what sales occur in California. Companies with large sales in California and production outside of the state will benefit from this provision. There's also a large corporate understatement penalty. It changes how corporations that understate their tax liability are assessed as a fee. The provision would reduce revenues by about $100 million. Only corporations that have excessive understatements relative to their total tax liabilities would be charged this penalty. Corporations that make minor errors consisting of less than 20% of their liability would fall under an exemption and not be charged the penalty. Also, it includes the use tax line and collection fee cost. It continues the placement of a line item for the use tax payment on your income tax returns. And this results potentially in an increased taxpayer compliance and an additional $10 million that's scored in revenues. I ask for your aye vote.
Seeing no... Mr. Calderon?
Just very briefly, Madam Speaker, members, this is a measure that rolls back the tax credits that were passed by this body several years ago to result in a savings to pay for the education funding. It also helps to collect the sales tax, and it also gets rid of the corporate overstatement penalty, which much of California business hated because they thought it was unfair, and I actually agreed. I didn't vote for it. So this measure is key in terms of whether or not we're going to balance this budget. I ask for an aye vote.
Ms. Harkey?
Ms. Harkey.
Thank you. Question of the author, and I hope you can answer this since you're just carrying the bill, sir.
Without objection.
Have there been any amendments to this since it was originally drafted? Because I've had a question on Section 41 of the bill, and I don't happen to have it here in front of me.
You're asking if there's been amendments since when?
Since this morning. We have a copy or an analysis from this morning.
I don't believe there have been amendments since this morning.
Mr. Jeffries?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I'm trying to recall when this came through Budget Sub 4, it seemed that when a taxpayer is unable to pay, they end up having to pay interest as well as the original tax liability. And now this particular bill, as I recall, is going to assess a fee on the person who's going to pay interest on the taxes that they haven't paid. So the state will be collecting the tax, the interest, and now charging you a fee to pay your tax and your interest. It seemed inherently unfair to now have the government charge an additional fee on top of the interest, on top of the tax, and therefore, as I recall, I opposed it at that time. Thank you.
Seeing no further questions or debate, Mr. Blumenfield, you may close.
I want to clarify my answer to Ms. Harkey. It was accurate what I said, but technically there was an amendment because it was originally a spot bill and the text was amended into it, so that qualifies as an amendment. However, it's exactly the same as in terms of substance as you saw it this morning. It's just as a procedural matter, it was amended into a spot bill, but substantively it is the same. And with that, I ask for your aye vote.
Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon moves the call. Mr. Calderon.
Yes, under motions and resolutions,
Without objection.
I request unanimous consent for Mr. Blumenfield to submit a letter to the file for AB 613 and SB 853.
Mr. Hagman, without objection. Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We do object and ask for a roll call vote.
Okay, Mr. Hagman is asking for a roll call vote. Mr. Calderon is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman is requesting a no vote to allow Mr. Blumenfield to print a letter in the Journal relating to AB 1613 and SB 853. This is a majority present and voting. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon is asking for an aye vote. Mr. Hagman is asking for a no vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 14. Motion carries. Mr. Calderon.
So also, I request unanimous consent to print a letter in the Journal by Mr. Chesbro for AB 2702.
Mr. Hagman.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We do object.
Mr. Hagman asked for a roll call on this motion to allow Mr. Chesbro to print a letter in the Journal relating to AB 2702. Clerk will open the roll. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon requests an aye vote. Mr. Hagman requests a no vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 43, noes 19. Motion carries. Members, who has adjourned memories? Adjourned memories? Mr. Fong? Do you have adjourned memories? No? Mr. Eng. Mr. Eng.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I want to adjourn in memory of a young man who was quite a humanitarian. He was known for his athleticism in El Monte, in my district, graduated from El Monte High School, where he lettered in football, baseball, and basketball. This young man opened up a race shop where he began to be part of an institution racing Volkswagen Beetles. But more importantly, his race car shop became a place where young people could gather and where he could mentor him. He would have celebrated his 49th birthday just a few weeks ago. Unfortunately, a tragic day. A family member and his wife found him dead, murdered in his own shop. It was on that day that he was supposed to finalize the adoption of a 6-month-old girl named Michaela, who will now be his survivor. I ask you respectfully to adjourn in memory of Hector Urias, 48, from El Monte. Thank you, members.
Ms. Conway.
Thank you, Madam Speaker and members. I rise to adjourn in memory of Sergeant Brian Pedro of Rosamond. Sergeant Pedro was a brave soldier who died in the line of fire while defending his country in Afghanistan last Saturday. At his young age of 27, Sergeant Pedro was courageously fighting in his second combat tour of Afghanistan for the U.S. Army. He was a dedicated soldier who had received numerous military decorations, including the Army Commendation Medal and the NATO Medal. Sergeant Pedro is survived by his wife, parents, and his younger brother, as well as a very large extended family. Please join me in honoring Sergeant Pedro's memory today as a soldier who courageously died fighting for his country. Thank you.
Any other adjourned memories? Okay, members, we're going to lift calls. We're going to lift calls on two bills. SB 866. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon moves the call. SB 855. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Mr. Calderon moves the call. Mr. Hoffman, do you have a point of information?
Yeah, I request to speak on condition of file. Madam Speaker, I just want to say, for those that are wondering, the last bill that was on call, SB 855, which is the Resources Trailer Bill, I have been one of those that's been off that bill. I've spent a good part of today reading and researching and vetting a couple of key provisions, including one that has a problematic sunset provision that would sunset certain conditions on grants to biorefineries in just 2 years. The conditions are important environmental safeguards to me and to many others, and yet I understand this to be a material part of the budget compromise agreement that has been reached. I believe this is a fixable problem. I believe as it currently stands, it is not good policy, but I also believe that we can revisit this and extend that, actually remove that sunset, which would be the good public policy. So I am going to go up on that bill, and I want to just rise to urge my colleagues to go up on it as well. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Mr. Calderon.
Yes, Madam Speaker, can we lift the call on SB 855?
Okay, we're going to lift the call on SB 855. Clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 54, noes 20 on the urgency. Ayes 54, noes 20 on the measure. Measure passes. AB 342, clerk will post. All members vote who desire to vote. All members vote who desire to vote. Clerk will close the roll, tally the votes. Ayes 56, noes 2 on the urgency. Ayes 56, no 2 on the measure. Urgency clause is adopted. Senate amendments are concurred in. Mr. Fong, you have a few adjourned memories.
Madam Speaker and members, please join me today in adjourning in the memory of former Assembly Member Victor Calvo. Victor was born February 13, 1924 in Mountain View, California, and graduated from Mountain View High School as valedictorian in 1942. He then volunteered for the Army Air Corps and served as a combat pilot during World War II. He returned from the war and attended Stanford University and graduated with a bachelor's degree in political science. His 32 years of public service began in 1957 when he was first appointed to the Mountain View Planning Commission. He was then elected to the Mountain View City Council in 1961 and re-elected in 1966, during which time he served 3 one-year terms as mayor. He was then elected to the Santa Clara County Board of Supervisors, where he served from 1968 to 1974. In 1974, he was elected to the State Assembly, where he served as chairman of the Assembly Committee on Resources, Land Use, and Energy. He was later appointed to the California Public Utilities Commission and the California Coastal Commission. He worked tirelessly to protect California's forests and authored legislation on coastal conservation, nuclear safety, farmland preservation, solar energy, clean water, and clean air. Former Assemblymember Calvo leaves behind a loving wife, Nellie Quintero Calvo, their 5 children, Susanna, Victor, Peter, Theodore, and Mary, and his 12 grandchildren. May he rest in peace, and we extend our sympathies and prayers to his family. Also, please join me today.
Mr. Nielsen, I think Mr. Nielsen would like to add something.
Okay.
If I may, Madam Speaker, I did know Assemblyman Calvo, a true gentleman. Chairman of the Resources Committee, who I often disagreed with, and he didn't always like my bills, but a true gentleman in the traditions of this institution. You could deal with each other in a gentlemanly and respectful manner and ways. He was a lion for the environment, but he respected other people's opinions as well. It is indeed well to remember a good man like Vic Calvo.
Please join me today in adjourning the memory of former Cupertino Mayor Don Burnett. Mayor Burnett was born in Kansas City, Kansas, and grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. He moved to California in 1958 when he received his master's in engineering from UC Berkeley. He served in the Navy and was stationed in Antarctica. The Academy of Science named Burnett Island in recognition of his service and work on historical climate patterns during his time in Antarctica. He returned back to the Bay Area and worked for Lockheed for 30 years. He loved his neighborhood. His love for his neighborhood is what got him involved in public service. He and his wife Nancy are part of a neighborhood group that got their neighborhood annexed to Cupertino. He also organized and founded the Fairgrove Neighbors that focused on emergency preparedness activities in their neighborhoods. He served on the Cupertino City Council from 1993 to 2001 and served as mayor in 1995 and 1996. Mayor Burnett was an avid bicycle enthusiast his entire life. Former Mayor Burnett died on September 11th after a battle with breast cancer. During his last months of his life, Mayor Burnett advocated for breast cancer awareness. He wanted people to know that men, too, can be stricken with breast cancer and encouraged men to get lumps examined early. Mayor Burnett leaves behind a loving wife, Nancy, and his children, Ken Burnett and Jill Stanton, and 2 granddaughters, asked to adjourn in his memory.
Thank you, Mr. Fong.